Now, without any further delay, coming to tonight's session on owning your product journey as product managers. Let me give an introduction to our distinguished and eminent speakers of tonight, Anu and Roger. Anu has over 20 years of experience in technology sector. She started her career as a software developer. She is an electronics and communication engineer and a certified pragmatic marketing professional. In 2016, she decided to follow her passion and founded NetDrock, a product management training, coaching, and consulting company. She's passionate about helping organization entrepreneurs create products that are valuable, usable, feasible, and viable. She trains and consults on product management, lean startup, and agile. In 2018, she was elected as one of the 50 most inspiring South African women in the field of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. She's also a speaker and has spoken at Google Women's Tech Makers Program and various product conferences. A very warm welcome to you, Anu. Thrilled to have you here with us tonight. We also have Roger Norton with us to share his actionable insights on the subject. Roger is the head of product at Founders Factory Africa, where he helps the portfolio of African startups to grow teams, design product processes, and build great products. Previously, he was co-founder and COO of Trickster. And before that, he ran a startup studio, PlayLogix, that built over 50 tech products in 5 years. It's where he learned the value in validating the business model first and why he co-founded the lead iterator, that is a validation process to help entrepreneurs know what to focus on and help investors make investment decisions. Roger has also written a book called Start Here on how to build a startup. A very warm welcome to you too, Roger. Handing the session over to you. Yeah.
Great, thanks very much for the handover. Anu, I think you're sharing your screen if you want to do the switch, and then I'll dive in. Thanks for the intro. And while we're pulling that up, if there are questions, we're watching the Zoom chat immediately. We'll follow up with the LinkedIn chat at the end of the session, but there will be quite a lot of time for questions. So if you have them, feel free to pop them through. We can pick them up. As mentioned, Anu and myself are working in the African startup ecosystem, doing a lot of agile and product consulting. And we've got a lot of, Anu's done quite a bit more working in corporates and large organizations. I've done a lot of work with startups, but there's been quite a lot of crossover. We've both worked with teams, both large and small, and done a lot of building product teams, coaching and training other product teams. And so a lot of this insights come from working with a very wide range of experience and leading, helping people build careers in product. And the first thing about a product is when you dive into it, there's a couple of very clear challenges when you start thinking about your career and you think about how you can grow it. And it's worth acknowledging these upfront because this is the reality that a lot of people find themselves in. And what's quite often is product as a discipline, as a sort of department, is relatively new and it's quite not very well understood. So quite often you end up being the only product manager on a team or the only product person in a company, in a smaller company, or in a larger organization. You're a product manager on a particular project, but it hasn't been set up right, or you're out of context of what that means. Quite often your line manager, the person that you report to, doesn't actually have any product experience. They're an engineering manager or they're a business manager. They've come from another aspect of the business. And product being a relatively new discipline and a relatively new way of thinking about how you build products and how you manage teams and how you run the efficiency of delivering value to customers through technical products. A lot of them don't understand those nuances. They haven't come from a design thinking or agile background. And a lot of the things that make you excel at your job beyond the managing backlogs and doing the obvious is just completely lost on them. So quite often you don't get much guidance or much a mentor through that space, especially not in direct management. And building in that is the work environment. And often product teams are quite new. Developer teams or business analyst teams have been around for quite a long time. And the way that they fit into the organization is quite well defined. But as organizations start adopting more of a product-led mindset, product starts becoming more and more important. But often the way you're running the team or the way you're positioned in the company or where your reporting lines are, that the work environment isn't actually conducive for you being as effective as you can be. And a last thing is a very common thing that we see is companies confusing project management with product management. And so the role and the freedom that you're given in the role in what you can deliver is very limited to effectively just managing deadlines and pushing tasks and just sort of managing the delivery of a project or a feature. And product management is so much more than that. Product management is a way of thinking. Product management is the discipline of how you communicate and how a team communicates and understands customer centricity and builds products that deliver value against the business strategy. It's not just about the project management aspects of it. And a lot of companies, and we see this quite a lot in Africa as well, where a lot of companies don't have, and the leaders in those companies don't know this distinction between that. And a lot of people are hired as a product manager, but end up actually just being a project manager. And it's quite often quite a difficult place to be in on how to, especially as a more junior employee, on how to communicate that to the boss and how to reposition your role within the organization to actually be effective. So the first thing to acknowledge is that, like, often there are these external factors that influence that. And what Anu and I are going to be running through today are just some approaches and ways of thinking and ways of looking at it on how you can assess and create your own, take initiative and take control over your own direction and identify where your gaps are and find ways of supporting yourself to work towards that, regardless of these constraints. And a lot of these things, as you start learning and as you start expanding, you can hopefully start changing and adapting some of these challenges and actually fixing these, sort of forging a path for those coming behind you. But for the first thing we want to just get out of the way is that in a lot of situations, these challenges are very, very persistent, and it often makes it much more difficult to be able to deal with it. And when you look at, so the first step is sort of assessing your skills and assessing what skills you have and where you want to grow, where your gaps are. And the approach that I like to use, this was actually from a team member that I was working with, who was a product designer at the time, as you can see from the broken comb, is we talk about T-shaped careers. So you can talk about either going wide, or you can talk about going deep and looking. And the core part, when you're looking at self-development, you're looking at moving your career forward, you need to assess which of those is most important. Do you want to become more of an expert and become more of a specialist in the certain things that you're already good at? Or do you want to increase that breadth and start moving into adjacent areas around the organization? In this case, he had come from a UX design background, had moved into sort of product design. And so what we did is we mapped all the roles of the jobs and the tasks that people, the skill sets that people have that he engaged with and that he worked with. So people in the rest of the product team looking at agile, analytics, more on the business model innovation, and then the engineering team and seeing where does he want to move in that spectrum and where does he want to expand his skill set into. So thinking of your career in that aspect against those two lenses will often help you identify which direction you want to double down on. And try to work out where your growth will come from and which sort of general trend or general direction your growth wants to come from. And different situations and different companies will require you to either go deep and become a specialist, specifically in a large organization, or if you're wanting to move up into management, if you're working in a smaller organization, you probably want to grow more breadth so you can cover more bases. And so this is just a really interesting tool on how to think about where the gaps are and which direction you want to grow your career first. And then once you know which direction you want to grow your career and say, I want to go deeper or I want to go horizontally, using things like the product management wheel is a great way of identifying what those gaps are. And the one thing about when you do these sort of assessments is it's often quite difficult to see how you operate in a space from your perspective only. And so using something like a product management wheel where you have the sort of spider diagram or spider graph of what all the skills are, and you can take these are the primary things for a more traditional PM. You could probably replace some of those with more product design or product analytics, depending on your role. But looking at the core skill sets of how good you are at those, and you can rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 of where you would see yourself on each of those lines. And the useful thing about this is you can then ask your peers to rate you on a scale of 1 to 10. Ask your line manager to rate you. And where this really gets interesting is when you start overlaying those together. And when you can see, and the next slide, when you can see the gaps of where your expectations and where somebody else's expectations are misaligned. So where do you see yourself as strong? Where do they see yourself as strong? And by doing that, you can hold up a mirror to better understand your gaps and better understand the context of where you will need to grow. And so identifying what these gaps are first working out which direction you want to go. Do you want to go broad or do you want to go deep? And then looking at, for each of these different aspects, for expanding in your understanding of agile principles, or the understanding problems and problem spaces and digging into that, or finding a solution, or the various aspects of how you go, and even the softer skills, like on this one is this listen and learn, or getting things done, like your ability to just execute and dive in and ship, or how well you work with team members. Like, you can put some softer things in here as well that help you understand and get a true reflection of what that looks like. So often 360-degree feedbacks will give you very qualitative feedback, but it's helpful, but also sometimes difficult to see the trends. And so this is an interesting way of getting quantitative feedback around those your skills, around those gaps, that'll empower you to actually identify that, to focus on the one or two areas that you really need to double down on. And that really sets you up for what you need to learn, and which direction you need to start moving in. So we're going to jump into a poll now quickly. And what we really wanted to know is have you ever done an assessment of your gaps and skills? How many people on the audience here have done that self-assessment, where you've looked at your own skills, you've looked at your own map of where you're going, where you're strong, where you're weak? And the next question we're going to follow with is, have you asked somebody else? So this one is just purely, have you reflected on yourself? And we'll get those answers through. And then the second question is, so let's get this one out first. I can see there it's majority no.
Let's just give them a few more seconds to answer the vote. Yeah.
So we'll run it through there.
Okay, launching the second one now.
60% no.
Yeah. So the second one is here.
And then the second question is, have you previously asked somebody else to reflect on your gaps? And that while you're filling this out, it's just a note as well. And I see this because we work across a number of different African markets, and the sort of assessment is also very cultural, and it depends on cultural nuances of whether you're comfortable doing that. And so that's definitely something that you can take into account to identify who are the people that can actually reflect honestly on that, but at the same time, like, which ones is right for you to actually get feedback from. So here, once again, 74% no. So the assessing of yourself is valuable. So the answer to the first question at 60%, or 60 was a 60% no, which is very few people have actually reflected on themselves and looked at where is it, like, what is it that you want to learn? And that's right, interesting, right? Because a lot of this community is around wanting to get into product management and learning. And the one thing about your career, and specifically in something in a discipline that's incredibly new, like product management, that's being developed, and is constantly changing and iterating, is you can't just wait to be given the information of what you need. You can learn it and you can study it, and there's curriculums that you can guide it, and the Institute of Product Leadership is good for that. But at the same time, you need to be thinking critically about where you want your career to go. Product is one of those things that it's so broad. It can be design, it can be analytics, it can be more technical product engineering, it can be more Scrum Master or Agile or team coaches. And so you really need to do an assessment of where are your strengths and where are the gaps between where you are today and where you want to get to. And like finding that out for yourself is definitely something that I hope you take away from this, is to do a reflection of that. But equally important, you're not going to see the thing, you're often going to project what you want to see, or you're going to project the way that you see yourself, and you're not going to see your blind spots. And so we'd really like to challenge you that it doesn't help to just do a self-assessment. You've actually got to reflect on a much wider and see what other people can see their lens and can see your gaps, and get the assessment through that. So whether you're doing it through a sort of a 360-degree feedback, or that a quantitative way like the PM wheel, will really help you identify where is your misunderstanding of where your skills are and how effective you're actually being. So that's definitely something you need to try and get a more robust and more holistic view at. And then once you've identified what these gaps are, you then need to work out, well, what do I want to do, and how do I build a plan on how to actually move my career forward. How do I take actions towards that? And I often challenge my teammates is to think about, if you were to leave this company, where would you go? Like, what is the role that you want next? And what do you need to build in order to get there? And so as we start thinking through your current situation, you can identify a skills assessment of where you're currently at. It doesn't just help to get better at where you currently are. You need to constantly be thinking about what type of role would you want to be positioned well for in 1 to 5 years time, and start thinking about what you would need to be able to know, what you'd need to be able to do in order to achieve that. And as you do that, you can identify this as a very simple future self matrix of identifying the as is how you are today. This is what you are, this is where you're at. And the to be is where you want to get to. So what is that role? What is the position? It could even be a promotion or a shift within your own organization. Maybe it's changing from a project management environment and task list to be more product management, even though your title and role and team won't change. And so identifying how you want to shift your career, where you are, where you want to be, and then identify the actions, looking at the gaps and the skills assessment that we've just covered, is you can define some actions of things that you want to learn, things that you need to develop, and tasks and projects that you can take on that will help get you from where you are today to where you want to be. And it definitely helps to set a time limit for this as well. If you're coming from the very experimental mindset, you always need to set a time limit on how long do you think it's going to take for you to achieve that in. It doesn't just help to say one day I'm going to have this role or have that job, but you've really got to put a time limit to say in the next 6 months or 12 months or 3 months, this is where I want to be. And then you can track your progress towards that. And you're putting a stake in the ground so that when that period is up, you can reflect back on what worked, what didn't work, how you achieved that, and the types of things that you delivered in order to actually get you there. And what's useful there as well is identifying what you have done, but also what you didn't do. What did you think you could do that you didn't get right? And trying to unpack and understand why that is will also help you reflect and understand how you want to grow and how you can do when you repeat this process, because growth is a never-ending process. But when you start thinking through it again and you're looking for that next milestone, you can understand, you can take the learnings from where you failed in the previous one. And so putting the stake in the ground and identifying what you want to be and the things you expect to be able to achieve in order to get you there is absolutely critical to be able to do up front, because that amplifies the learnings at the end, because you learn that you did get there and why you didn't. Also, there's a quick note unpacking those actions and the things you want to achieve. It's also important to note that there's a sweet spot, a Goldilocks zone on self-development, and as your motivation increases, and you kind of want something that's challenging. You want to push yourself a bit, but you also don't want to push yourself too hard. If you push yourself too far, where you fail on everything, then it's not motivating at all. In fact, it becomes demotivating. But also, if you make those too easy and you achieve them all, that's not really gonna give you fulfillment and the sense of growth and personal growth in your role. So you really need to reflect on those actions and identify that they're a stretch, but not too much of a stretch. And they really need to try and sit in a comfortable Goldilocks zone of how you work in that. So just reflecting on this first section, it's really about identifying your gaps first, or at first identifying where you want to grow. Do you want to grow horizontally? Do you want to grow vertically? And looking at the team around you to understand where you would fit in. And often it's identifying those gaps in the horizontal that you need to fill in order to instead of growing too much wider, there might be some missing gaps that you can improve on. And so once you've identified the direction you want to grow in, you can then identify the skills that of where you're at, of where you're weak, where you're strong, and particularly getting other people's feedback of that. And then the third step is to set out some sort of target, some sort of future self mapping, where you can map your as is, to be, and a set of actions on how you're going to get there. And then I'm going to hand over to Anu to pick it up on how, now that you know where you want to learn and you know what those gaps are, Anu's going to chat about some of the actions and the things you can do to actually fill those gaps and get there.
Cool. Thanks, Roger. Cool. So yeah, so once you've put your plan and you've written it down, the next step is starting the learning process. So learning happens in various ways. So think of it as multiple steps. I'm going to go through 4 steps. And the first step is consuming information, reading about it. Maybe we've got blog posts. There's a lot of blog posts. I wish 10 years ago when I started this journey, I didn't have as many blog posts, but we're so spoiled. There's a lot of product managers writing about their experiences, reading books, a lot of trading options, conferences, podcasts, etc. But often when I coach product managers, I tell them you need to understand your learning style, whether you learn better through hearing or listening or through reading. Everyone's got a different style. And sometimes it's also nice to mix a bit of reading through with a bit of listening. So we call that consuming. It's acquiring the new knowledge. So once you've identified your gaps, you need to acquire the knowledge and you need to start consuming information. So that's the first step. Then the second step is actually taking it and applying it. It's no use reading things and then you actually don't apply it because you're not likely to remember it and actually doesn't add value. So what you can do is speak to your manager about it, explain to them this is the gap, right? You've had the conversation, hopefully, when you came up with the, the assessment, it's a conversation you've had with your manager, and then you get hopefully a chance to apply what you're learning. And it can be a new company initiative, or it's within the product that you're working in. And if that's not likely to work, there's a lot of side projects available that is often outside work. There's a lot of opportunities these days. Look for that side hustle where you can actually apply what you have consumed and learned. And that's basically, you can see it as building on the knowledge that you have consumed. Then the next step is actually reflecting. A very important step. So it's good to have a companion who you can share this information with, the journey that you're on, for both for informational and emotional support, and to keep you on track. So they actually give you feedback on the journey. And the more you talk about it, I think there is a tendency for most of us not to talk about these things. But the more you talk about it, the more feedback that you get, and the more you can reflect on it and look at what you've learned so far in the journey, and then how you can get better moving forward. Because it's a journey, it's not something you apply once and then you're expert at. So the reflecting helps you actually share that journey with somebody, and that person can point out and keep you honest while you're on that journey. And then the final step is actually sharing that information. So once you've reflected on it, once you've practiced it, you can start sharing it, just like what Roger and I doing today. It's basically sharing what we have learned. I'm sure there's networks. There is a Product Institute. I know there's so many networks and meetups in India. There is actually, within your organization, there might be other product managers. Maybe when new product managers come on board, you can be a person who shares the knowledge on a specific topic that you've been actually applying. And that's where true mastery actually comes in, when you actually talk about and share your experience doing something. And I just want to share the journey that one of the things that I did in my career is that I learned very early in my career that I was very strong on the product owner type of work. So the actual tactical work, but not really around customer interviews or product discovery. So the first thing that I did when I realized that was a gap was that I joined Teresa Torres's course on customer discovery. And there it was a fantastic course because it was online. You could learn, there was information reading online. And then there was also a peer support network where we got together once a week and shared our learnings and actually applied it and shared our learnings and got feedback from them. So the consuming happened there, and then we applied it. We were supposed to go apply it in our side project, and then we had to come back and reflect on it. And then after that, once I did that, I actually did customer interviews, and then also I actually shared my journey in one of our Agile conferences. And it's a good idea to reflect on these 4 things and to think about where do you actually focus on, what are you less like, what is less like, what don't you do more of? Do you spend equal time in all these 4 boxes, or do you spend more time consuming and applying, but you don't reflect and share? So it's something to think about. And if you're not spending equal time in all of these things, maybe you should be. So it's nice to reflect on that as well. So I definitely know I do a lot of consuming, but sometimes applying, reflecting, and sharing doesn't happen. So yeah, so that's the various ways to learn and how you can progress and get better at the specific gap that you identified. Okay, so we've got a poll here that's, does your manager give you feedback regularly regarding your work? And this is other than your performance review that happens probably once a year. And yeah, yes or no. I can't see the poll results. Shama, if you can just read it to me once you've got it.
Sure, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Sure, I can see it here as well, so happy to.
Okay, I'll just wait 1 or 2 seconds for that before I move on.
Cool, it's currently at 60% yes, 40% no.
Okay. Okay, that's 60% is quite a good number.
It's down to 56% yes.
Okay. All right. So the next slide, research actually shows that only 28% of people receive feedback a few times a year. And 19% receive it once a year or less. So that's a number to reflect on. And also there are other studies that actually show that employees like to get corrective feedback versus positive feedback. And also managers are actually not keen to give corrective feedback. So feedback is an important part of learning. And if this is what's happening in our work environments, right? What you or all of us as product managers need to do or understand is you need to develop the skill to pull feedback naturally from your team members and managers. So I think of product management skills as muscles, different types of muscles. So you need to develop your muscle to pull feedback from your team and your manager. Otherwise, you are losing out and nobody's actually going to voluntarily come and give you feedback. Okay, so to be really great at feedback, you have to get it, give it, and encourage it. So, and you absolutely need it for your growth. So why is feedback so important? So very important for me is it gives clarity on my areas of development. So I always ask for critical feedback and I always encourage product managers to ask for critical feedback and not positive feedback. Positive feedback is great and it's easier for people to give because it gives you reinforcement for what you're really doing well. However, what you need to grow, to accelerate your growth, is clarity around opportunities for development. And that's what you need to really be looking out for. And it also, as you get this feedback, it builds your confidence and also encourages everyone to take risks. If you build your confidence and then you are more likely to take risks, which is what you want in your teams. And when you have new people joining your team as product managers, right? When you give them this positive feedback and really feedback on where they can improve, it kind of combats imposter syndrome, which almost everyone has, right? So, you want to try and prevent that by giving them feedback. So always encourage managers or head of products to give feedback, but that's not an excuse for you as a product manager to get feedback as well. You need to ask for it. It also generally makes, work environments fun and pleasant. So yeah. Okay, we've got the results. Okay, so how do you go about getting feedback, right? So be very persistent. So not just with your manager, you can also get it from your team members. So as product managers, if you think about it, right? You are facilitating meetings, you are running design sprints, you are facilitating sprint planning. There is so many micro moments that you can get feedback. You don't have to wait for that performance review. So what I would encourage is that you sincerely keep asking people and ask them after every single meeting where you've had to facilitate or where you've had a difficult meeting and you responded in a not so great way. Don't shy away. Find out the right approach, the right situation, when to ask for feedback and ask for it and express that you genuinely want it. And sometimes there is fear, but fight that fear and ask for that feedback. And when someone does give you that feedback, right? I like to treat it as a precious gift because your manager is not often not likely to give it, because it's sometimes a very difficult conversation. And when they do give it, please thank them the first thing, thank them for that feedback, and tell them you really appreciate it. And the next thing that you need to do is make it very visible, the changes that you are making based on that feedback. And sometimes these changes do take time, and that's okay, but clearly show them that you're working towards it, and keep them part of that journey. And very important is there is going to be cases where you're going to actually disagree with the feedback. And when you receive that feedback and if you're feeling like emotions and angry and quite upset, don't respond immediately. Just tell them, I hear you, let me think about it, and I'll come back to you on that. Very useful to do that, because otherwise you're going to react emotionally. And do get back to them with the full explanation of why you don't necessarily agree with it, and they might actually give you some other feedback on top of that. And the key thing I want to highlight is that when you receive feedback, and if people feel punished because you give them that feedback, that's probably where it's going to stop. So don't you need to be grateful, and so don't punish them for it. And also show them the progress. If you don't show them, and if they feel like you're not doing anything with that feedback, they are likely not to continue with that. So make it work. So generally, if there is no feedback culture in your team, there's nothing stopping from you starting it. There's no excuse. And once you start encouraging that, who knows what others will do. It might be easier for everyone to give each other feedback. And it also keep in mind, it doesn't have to be feedback from your manager. If that's difficult, it's from your peers as well. And I've also worked in environments where I've got one or two great peers that I've worked with. And before every session or meeting I went to, I would actually ask her, please, can you just observe what I'm doing and give me feedback after the session? So you've got to find the right situation, the right approach that works for you. Okay, so then how to ask for feedback, right? So I'm assuming most of you do have one-on-one sessions with your line manager. When you do have those one-on-one sessions, right, try and keep it very specific on how you ask the question. So if you ask for them, do you have any feedback? You're not likely to get very much detailed feedback. What you do want to ask them is think about the last week that you had sessions or meetings, and ask them very specific questions about those meetings. So you might ask something like, in the strategy meeting that we had last week, when I presented the strategy, I felt like the customer success team really was very uncomfortable with the strategies that I put forward. Did you feel the same, or am I not reading it correctly? So it's actually very specific. You're asking very specific feedback about a session you had last week. Another way to ask is perhaps tell your manager, I've got 500 things on my table at the moment. I've decided to focus on these 3 things because I feel like that's what the right focus is. And I'm not actually going to focus on these 10 other things because I just can't do it at the moment. I'm keen to hear your thoughts on it. So that's the kind of conversations you need to have, because if you are very specific, you will get more valid and detailed feedback. Okay, so that's about feedback. The next step is building a support network. So we all need support networks, and I think especially for product managers, it is very relevant because often you are the only product person in your team. That's one, or you might be the only product person in your organization. And it is so important to have a support network. And if you think about your support network, encourage 3 different types of people you want to build, or just 3 buckets. One is people at work who give feedback regarding your work, and that's specifically around your performance at work. And again, this can be your peers. Pick someone who you get along with well, someone who you know is more likely to give you critical feedback, and keep asking them to point out your blind spots and ask them for feedback like the way I specified. Then you want someone who actually knows what good product management looks like. Someone who has a perspective of, this is what a good product person looks like. And that person might not be a line manager. You might be reporting into someone who's never done product before and just happens to be a line manager for whatever reason. So it needs to be someone, and that person might not be at work, it might be outside. But once you've identified your gaps, as Roger specified, once you've gone through that process, then what you can do is pick a mentor that doesn't have to be with your organization, who is actually and who knows what good product looks like, and is going to pick up your blind spots and help you grow and help you learn better. Then the other thing is someone who lives up to your full potential, or who helps you live up to your full potential. So as based on a self-development plan that you did, right? You know where you want to go, and get someone who buys into that vision and who completely believes in that vision. And that person can help you, guide you get there, whether it's pointing out your blind spots, or whether it's helping you as you look for your next job, helping you think about, hey, is it going to help you achieve that big picture vision that you have in mind? So that's the 3 kinds of people that you want as you build your support network. And pieces of advice, when you build this network, invest in the good times. So don't reach out to them when it's only bad times and when you're struggling. Do it persistently and consistently. Go to them even in the good times, and never ask them, do you want to be my mentor? It should be an organic relationship, right? So you get to know them, and you have maybe once a quarter discussions with them, share where you want to be, but don't reach out to them when it's just the bad times, and let that relationship grow organically rather than make it a very formal relationship. And then what you want to do is encourage honesty. It's like, make it clear, I'm here, I really need you to help me point my blind spots out, because I really want to learn, and I know you can add value. So encourage that honest feedback. And then listen carefully to what they have to say. You'll get so many golden nuggets from them, and listen carefully and write them down. And some of them you'll remember forever, because I have, there is definitely things that I've got from my mentors. So for speaking in public speaking, for example, I know I do a lot of ums, and I don't always realize it, but someone told me. It was really critical feedback, but I appreciate it, and listen carefully and write it down, because that's what you need to improve. And then another thing to keep in mind is that support network might have to change over time. So as you grow as a product manager and you decide you want to go more into the product side versus you want to manage people, that board of directors or support network will change, and you need to refresh it, continuously refresh it. So, for example, when I became a senior product manager and then I decided to start my own company, my network changed, my support network changed, because then I wanted to network with more people who've created consulting companies and who are more successful, and therefore my network actually changed a bit, because they would give me more relevant feedback. And then, yeah, seek diversity in both thought and experience. It's nice to get diverse perspectives. We tend to hook onto people that think like us, but that doesn't give diversity. It's also part of the interviewing process with product managers. You tend to like product managers who are similar to you, but it's no use having 5 product managers in an organization that are very similar to you. You want diverse people who have different strengths. So similar to that, build your support network very carefully in terms of diversity, in terms of thought and experience. Okay, I just wanted to share this picture with you. So this is our little support network in Cape Town, South Africa. So this is our little coaching circle. We have a group of 14 product managers, Roger and I part of that circle, and we get together once in 2 weeks. And the group itself, we get together and decide what we want to learn. And then sometimes we bring a speaker, an expert speaker to speak, or sometimes, and actually most of the times, it's the group itself that shares their learnings, and we choose a topic, and it's a topic that resonates with most of the product managers. And sometimes one of the product managers run a workshop, or sometimes it's a lean coffee style where we where we share challenges and we get feedback and ideas from the other product managers. And that's our little support network. So you can also, this is more like a peer-to-peer support network where we have product managers with similar experience. So in this specific coaching circle, it's product managers with more than 2 years experience, some more senior than the others, but there is a lot of learning that happens. So that's another form of support network. So if you find a gap as part of your assessment and find out the other product managers that have the same gap, why not form a support network, peer-to-peer support network, and get together once in 2 weeks or once in a month, what works for the people. And yeah, so that's our little support network in Cape Town. Okay, and then finally, often when I coach product managers, I always hear this, is I don't have enough time for this. I don't have enough time to learn. Yeah, so as product managers, you're supposed to be good at prioritization, right? So you need to have self-development up on top. So the only thing I can say is you need to make the time for your learning and your self-development. Nobody else will. If you don't make the time, something else will fill that gap for sure, and it's your choice. So do you want to grow as a product person? They need to make the time. There's just no excuse, and you need to be good at prioritization anyway as part of your role. And some hacks to get better at self-development is that habits form based on frequency and not on time. And what that means is if you need to dedicate time, but you don't, for example, need to spend 1 hour every week. Rather start small, say allocate 20 minutes, put it in your calendar every week, and make sure you do it every week. The point is do it, allocate the time, you don't have to stretch it, start small, allocate 20 minutes a week for your learning. And then get an accountability partner who actually checks in with you regularly in terms of, hey, how's that learning going? Because that will keep you honest. And then the other thing to remember, and this is where the peer-to-peer support network works as well, is that we pick up habits from people around us. So if you are around other product managers who for them learning is a priority, you will also do it. So surround yourself with other product managers who also value self-development. That will put some pressure. It's some healthy pressure on you to do it. And then we repeat a behavior when our brain experiences pleasure and when the experience is satisfying. So what I suggest is when you allocate the 20 minutes, reward yourself or do something that makes you happy. So for example, I love coffee and I love going to a coffee shop once a week and making sure I do my self-development there and my learning there. So whatever works for you as an individual, reward yourself for doing that 20 minutes a week. And that will really keep you going. So yeah, and a simple example of it is that, for example, when I hate running, I absolutely hate running. But with COVID, when COVID hit, one of the easiest ways to exercise was running. And I started not even running, I started walking every day, like 10, 15 minutes. And I did that for like 2 weeks. And then slowly I started stretching that 20 minutes to about 40 minutes, again, almost every day. And then I started running. And I can tell you now, it's been about 4 months and I'm still doing it and I'm actually enjoying it. And I think all these principles about habits apply there, is that start small. I had my husband who was doing it with me. He was my accountability partner. And I was with family who love running. And yeah, it gives me a lot of joy at the moment. So yeah, I would challenge you to start small and follow these principles. And then it becomes a pattern and it's easier to continue that learning journey. Okay. Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much. And yeah, so what we would like to do is ask you a question now. What are you doing to track and grow your career at the moment? Okay, I haven't been checking the chat window and I haven't been checking questions. So,
audience, here's a chance to tell us about your career and how you want to grow in your career, and get some real-time inputs from Anu and Roger. So make the most of this session. Please go ahead and ask your questions in the Q&A window, or you can come live and ask your questions directly to the speaker. Please raise your hand and I can unmute you.
While you're doing that, I'll just add a small point in there. Often, like building a habit of learning is critical, specifically when our product moves so fast and there's new things and new frameworks coming out so quickly. So one easy habit that is easy to get started with is sort of read an article a day or 3 per week. And that's the kind of thing that if by Friday you haven't done it, you can actually churn through and catch up on what you've missed. And you start building a habit of just every day consuming, learning something new, expanding your horizon, and then seeing how you can apply that.
Great. So we have this first question from Chandrika. Chandrika, please go ahead and ask a question. You're live.
Yeah, thanks for the good session. So I'm Chandrika. So currently I'm in product owner role, and I wanted to start my career into product management. So started with small trainings like some courses in academia. So that's about the product strategy and marketing studies, and also competitive analysis. So I started with these things and what else I can do, because currently I'm not into product management role, but I just want to go to that role. So what else I need to do when I don't have hands-on experience?
Chandrika, a quick question. Are there product managers at your company or?
Yeah, but not full time. I mean, product management role, they don't give to offshore. So we have it onshore, but not at the offshore. So it is a little difficult because the on-job training is not there for most of the people.
Okay. Anu, do you want to dive in or shall I?
Yeah, I can give. So Chandrika, so you said it's offshore, there are product managers. So one thing I can think of is you can try, and there is nothing stopping you with sharing or telling them that you're quite interested, and you can almost shadow them in a way it's possible. So that's one thing. I wouldn't shy away from saying that, showing your interest in product management or speaking to your manager about it, and then shadowing some of the product managers, what you can do remotely. So that's one thing I'd suggest. And then the other thing I'd suggest is looking at side projects. So outside your organization. So I know there is a lot of programs outside in India as well, where you can possibly try out some of the elements of product management. So look at a side hustle. Maybe it's a startup that, startups are always, they need people, and they're always like people who are willing to help out, and you've got some experience, and you've obviously got the product owner experience. And maybe you can start off with helping some of the product owner experience, but telling and also helping with some of the product strategy stuff. So that's something I can recommend.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank you. Yeah,
I agree with that. Just one thing to add to Anu's first point around just raising your interest is find some tasks that they're doing. And if it's in the same company, you should be able to share information and ask them for the documents they're writing, or ask them for a bit of insight into some of the work they're doing. And depending on also, like when you're practicing or when you're wanting to assess things, you have a bit of understanding or context of the business. That see if you can actually do the task, and then ask them for their version and see how you can improve or what you can learn on. So the work that you do doesn't have to be like contributing to the company. While you're learning, you can shadow what other people are doing and actually start doing those tasks, start doing your own version, and then reflecting against theirs, or looking at what they've done and trying to unpack that, and then see if you can write your own one for a different product or feature or a different area. So like there are still communication around that even if you can't do the work, or if you can't shadow them because of time zones, you can still look at the output of the work that they're delivering and try and attempt that yourself and see where that comparison is, even if they're not going to use your version until you can actually feel comfortable enough that you can maybe share it with them and see if they want to use that to incorporate that and start doing more of that kind of work.
Okay. Yeah.
Obviously, with the team management stuff, it becomes a bit more difficult.
Yeah, correct. Thank you so much, Anu and Roger. So I have one more question. So I heard like one of the skill for the product manager is about metrics. So may I know what exact metrics it is? What are the KPIs that we need to look into? Is it like a return on investment or something else?
Yeah, I'll go this one there. So the product analytics is typically looking at analyzing user behavior. So how you make decisions as a product manager needs to be based off, ideally based off some kind of data, either qualitative or quantitative. And so a lot of the product analytics is looking at what's important for a particular business. And that all stems from the business strategy of what are we actually trying to deliver, what is the unit economics, or what is the mechanism on how we deliver value to customers, and then how do you measure whether you're delivering that value. So for every business, it's slightly different. There's a couple of Lean Analytics is a good book to start with as a good baseline to get you thinking about how you track analytics and how you do that in the simplest way. But it's really just looking at how do we make data-driven decisions, and what are we tracking of user behavior that we can analyze to get insights in order to drive future product prioritization and feature design.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chandrika, for the great question. I think we'll move on to the next one due to time constraints.
Yeah.
And Jack Tilbury, you could go ahead and ask your question. He is not around. Okay. There's another question from LinkedIn by Adi.
Hi, guys.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Jack. Ask.
Hi, Roger. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, hi.
Perfect. So it's a very interesting point you mentioned on the hold yourself accountable and the route of actually getting a buddy in the space as well.
Yes. I think we just lost Jack. Jack, it sounds like your audio is dropping. Maybe drop your question in the chat and we'll pick it up from there.
Okay. Meanwhile, we'll take this another question by Adinath on the LinkedIn. What do you think about a launch at all cost attitude by product managers or by organizations?
So just repeat that question again.
Okay. What do you think about launch at all cost attitude by product managers or by organizations?
Yeah, that's yeah. So I think that forms part of maybe the culture of the organization, right? So it's just a tricky one. So we shouldn't be launching at all costs, right? So we have to, it's ideally you need to start small and do small things and experiment. So if you've got so if it's an early stage, so it depends on the context, but if you've got an early stage idea and you think it's valuable based on user feedback, if that's the scenario, you want to test with users and make sure there is some sort of retention before you formally launch something or like do a full-on market launch. If it is like small incremental improvements on features, for example, and launch it at all costs, well, we do have there should be a process around testing and that you're comfortable as a product manager based on feedback from your product team that it's safe to release this feature. And if management says launch it irrespective of what you say, I think sometimes you have to let people fail and feel the pain, and then maybe it won't happen again. So if it's a strong culture in the organization, sometimes you have to go through a painful journey and hopefully people learn from that.
Typically launch at all costs is an indication of a lack of trust or lack of transparency or lack of clarity from the management layer or from the person and forcing that on the teams to actually deliver. So it's understanding why do they not have the transparency, or why are they not clear on that? Because normally they're pushing you to launch because they just want to get it out. They don't understand the implications of getting it wrong, or they don't trust that. They believe that you're just making work instead of actually delivering it on time, or they need to hit their mandate. And so trying to understand like why are we pushing for that? Like, are we still going to deliver value to users by doing that? And if we're not going to deliver value to users, why are they still pushing us to do that? What are the other forces through which they're making decisions? And if they're not making, like, ideally you want to launch in order to be able to deliver value to users. So looking at things of how can you ship more incrementally, how can you make smaller iterations, will allow you to ship faster. And if they're wanting to see progress, that's a great way of fixing that, instead of waiting for one massive release that is so complex and so many interdependencies that they just say, just push it out there and we fix it on the way down. But normally when you're getting forced into that situation, it means that there's some kind of underlying issue and force in the organization that's pushing you in the wrong direction. And that's what you actually need to try and fix, is identify that sort of the root cause, and what are those real motivations that aren't being articulated and that are coming out in that pressure.
Thank you for that brilliant answer, Roger and Anu. And Adinath, I hope that answers your question. Now, let's just say this one last question, if that's okay, Roger, and we are good for time. Okay, this is Jack again. He's eager to ask his question. So Jack, go ahead.
Sorry, I lost signal there. The point I was going on, Anu, you made a good point about being aware of where you need to go in your career beyond the company you currently are now. So taking into account growing within your current company, but if you leave your current company, what other product management skills and other directions do you need to, the skills you need to have to be going those directions? And it got me thinking the other day. I have friends who are graphic designers and developers, for example. They've got Behance online profiles and portfolios. Developers have their Git repos of projects and whatnot. Should us as product managers also be having portfolios of some form or another of both practical and theoretical knowledge that we've acquired?
I think so, definitely, Jack. So there is so much opportunity for that, right, these days. So you know, it's and if I map that to product managers, what is similar for product managers? So you can do you can write blog posts. So Roger's very good at writing blog posts. That's one thing. You can do it on LinkedIn. There's so many different platforms for that. There's Medium, and all you need to do is tweet about it, use the right hashtags. There is that's one opportunity. There is LinkedIn. You know, there's also speaking, right? Speaking, we are always in Cape Town looking for speakers and people who are sharing their experiences, because that is all something that adds to your portfolio. Anything that when I interview product managers, anything that you do outside work that shows passion for product management is also something that you can add to your portfolio. So for example, when I was a product manager, I used to help at a lot of accelerator programs. I know Roger also used to do that. You know, it's also part of it's part of giving back, and also it's a journey. It's adding to the community, and it's also something that adds to your portfolio. So there is all that is what I see as part of the product manager portfolio. Sharing what you don't, like I talked about, sharing all those things add to your portfolio. And always what I'm keen to learn is, what are product managers doing outside their work, because they've got a passion for product.
Yeah, when I look at a product
tracking.
Sorry, Jack, when I look at a product manager's CV, I'm looking for two things. The first is I'm looking for actionable metrics. So on this, launch this project in this timeline and increase revenue by Y, or whatever it is, like looking at some kind of articulation of what have you achieved, and measures of those achievements. And then secondly, looking at sort of community building, thought leadership events, like what do you do to actually engage with your craft to show that you're interested in learning and growing. And volunteering to run meetups or run things are great ways of exposing yourself to that. And that's generally a good sign of someone who's really passionate about what they do.
Yeah, and I think there's actually room to go a step further from your CV. I'm starting to work with things like Coda and Notion, and creating my own sort of wiki within there to have actionable things that you can send beyond that go beyond your CV, that maybe dive into a bit more detail, just like developers and designers send examples of projects and previous projects they've done. So it just got me thinking along the lines of, should we as PMs also have that on hand?
Yeah, the hard thing is you don't really have projects, like you don't have an asset that you've built, because it's the developers have built it or the designers have designed it. So it's often not a tangible, this is a project in a portfolio. So when we talk about portfolio, it's more about a collection of works and thinking and engagements or videos or those sort of things, often self-generated content that helps you distill what you're learning that you can share with your peers, but that kind of starts to build out a more than just the job list of your CV.
Perfect. Thanks, Roger. Thanks, Anu. Appreciate it.
Perfect. So I think we are done on time, and I won't keep you much longer. But again, audience, please feel free to go ahead and scan the QR code on the screen and have one-on-one discussion about your product management career and career paths you want to choose, and get a coaching session with us, 30 minutes with our expert panel. And lastly, we have enjoyed having you with us, Roger and Anu. It's been a complete pleasure. And thank you for delivering a brilliant session and really some thought-provoking and great insights from you. And I'm sure our audience will definitely benefit from the methods you suggested and get ahead in their career. So, right, before we conclude, could we just go and announce the champion of curiosity here with the best question asked? I know that we took only a few, but anything that, that you want to, award them with the digital course that we promised? Oh, I could take that later, no worries.
Anu, do you want to make a decision? Or?
No. I think they were all such good questions, so I don't want to select one.
I'll take the call then. Okay, perfect. Right. So again, Anu, thank you for joining us and sharing your time and thoughts with us. And please accept the certificate of appreciation, a small gesture from the Institute. So if you scan the QR code on the certificate, it'll take you to a recording of the session. And we have created a dedicated Hall of Fame page for you. And we'll be sharing the recording of this session on YouTube as well. So to conclude, thank you so much. And we have enjoyed having you with us.
Thank you very much. It was great to be here.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah. And audience, thank you for
Good
joining
luck.
in. It was great interacting with you all. And I hope to see you all at the next webinar on the 27th of October. Until then, have a great night and happy learning and stay skilled. Bye-bye.
Good night. Good luck.